Hello everyone, I'm Chris Mazzillo, Superson, and this is a video game review of Super Mario, Mario and Luigi Dream Team Bros. The Mario and Luigi games have always been pretty decent. They're turn-based RPGs featuring Mario and Luigi, which started off on the Game Boy Advance. The core mechanic is that one button controls Mario and another button controls Luigi. However, in the overworld, seeing as Luigi's always just following Mario at point-blank range, you just have to press two buttons to jump instead of one. However, in combat, you can block and dodge moves independently of one another by pressing A or B, depending on who needs to jump and dodge at whatever time. The previous games have all had some form of gimmick. In the previous game, Bowser's Inside Story, there was the three-dimensional movement of Bowser, and then the two-dimensional movement of Mario and Luigi inside Bowser's kidneys. This time, you're just Mario and Luigi all the time, except for the 2D platforming takes place inside Luigi's dreams, which also apparently seem to be like everyone's dreams, as they're like semi-constant throughout every single person, and based on the area of where you sleep or something. Anyway, this is all part of the Year of Luigi thing that Nintendo have been doing in order to experiment with the one Mario character they're willing to actually experiment with, because Mario's only good with jumping and running to the right. But at the same time, I guess Luigi is also good at that. Ugh. Anyway, Luigi and the gang all travel to some vacation island full of vague accents and stereotypes to add to the casual racism, and oh no! Luigi just keeps on falling asleep, and there are some pillow people, and would you believe it? Princess Peach gets kidnapped along the way. By Bowser. Again. I felt a little cheated here, because in most Mario RPGs, the main villain isn't ever Bowser. He's more of a side character who you get to see, hilarious incidents happen with, as he's annoyed that he wasn't the one who kidnapped Princess Peach, because, he views himself as the villain, therefore he must be doing villainous things. And if someone else is on his territory, he gets a bit mad. But no, he's the villain. Like always, except for this time he does have a bit more of a speaking role. Then there's also the other villain, who's some evil bat thing, who's kind of evil because evil? But not in the same way as Bowser. It's more so of just, evil for the sake of, Something you might notice straight off the bat is, Jesus Christ, does it take forever for you to actually do anything? I know previous Mario games had their chatty conversations and whatnot, but they were normally quite funny. Here it feels like every gosh darn screen you go on, there's a new conversation to be seen. When I just want to jump up a mountain. There's a level of hand-holding in this which is just kind of painful. Without listing too many details, there's one incident where you're given a new ability that lets you jump higher, and you're told to go to previous areas to get some special items. So you go to all these previous locations where you just couldn't jump high enough to reach up to them, and instead of there being an optional sign to read that says warning, gotta jump really high into the ledge, instead you got given a 1-minute conversation that basically goes along the lines of, oh no, we could never jump up high enough to reach this ledge. If only we had a certain ability that could let us jump higher. If only we could hit the R button twice and then press A or B, allowing us to go into that special form that allows us to jump higher. If only we had that. Oh well, it's like that for every single screen. You don't even get a chance to experiment, as you're normally told everything before you've even given a chance to do anything. And normally things are not that challenging. You've worked out the puzzle already mid-conversation, so it just seems like a waste of time. These lengthy conversations are normally just down to the fact that you have two characters functioning as your Nami from Legend of Zelda. I mean, one was normally painful enough, but now you have two of them just talking at each other constantly. One of them's not even that vital to the plot. He's just another character from a previous game. Another horrible problem that I kept on seeing was just so many tutorials. The biggest offence I saw in the entire game was probably I'd entered the 3rd or 4th area, and so I thought I'll just go buy some badges to see if they put any new ones. which, you know, are special items which you kind of build up over time through battle, and you can use them, like, in the bottom screen as a form to either heal or deal damage to all the enemies or something. Anyway, suddenly when I went to go buy them, I was given a tutorial on how to use badges. And there was no option either. It was just, I just had to look at it. I just walked in like, hey, here's a tutorial on how to use badges. And the worst part was, I'd already been given this conversation in a previous area, if not like 2 areas ago. When badges are first given to you, you're given a tutorial on how to use them. And this new tutorial was the exact same tutorial with no new information. I was like 20 hours into the game. I mean, sure, it took like 6 hours to even properly start the game, but still, it was just really silly. Another problem was the few chances they actually gave you to experiment, they told you anyway. Like in the dream world, when there was a new thing for Luigi to jump into, the character, one of the characters would be like, I'll be right here if you've got any questions. So, you know, you jump into it, and then instantly, without you being able to press anything, a tutorial would spring up, and he'd be like, hey, this is how you do everything to do with this. And sometimes this would even involve, like, telling you how to jump into the thing in the background, despite, you know, it being 50 hours in, and you not being able to actually complete this far, without being known how to jump into these things. They changed the graphical style quite a bit from the last games. In all the previous games, even Bowser's Inside Story, everything was just 2D sprites, which are all, you know, add a like nice sense of charm to everything. But now they've turned everything into 3D models. Like pretty much everything is now a 3D model, which I kind of like. It's fine if the graphics look good, but at the same time, I felt like it kind of lost the sense of the charm it once had. The combat had moments where, you know, it seemed actually quite fun and fair, where the enemies, you know, were challenging enough to counter or block their attacks or anything. But then this also changed to being completely unfair. If there was ever an attack where something fell from the sky, from above the screen, it was pretty much impossible to block because it fell at such speed that there was no way to like predict when it was going to happen, and you only have like half a second to actually attack or like react, in which that half second is normally the amount of time it takes for Mario or Luigi to swing their hammer, so you normally ended up just taking a crap ton of damage 90% of the time. Then there are the super special giant boss monsters, in which you rotate the 3DS to its side, and which I don't actually really mind because it's actually quite an interesting use of the hardware. The only problem I really had was that they don't actually reflect any of your stats, so all that grinding you did was ultimately useless anyway, as it's just, you know, can you do this everything perfectly? As well as if you die near the very end, the boss battles take a fucking age, if there's just like cutscenes after cutscene in like mid-fight, and so it can take a bloody age to get back to where you were. Obviously, the biggest problem in rotating the 3DS and having a continuous image across both screens is the fact you have a giant hinge down the middle of it. So if there's an attack coming across the screen, you're only given about half a second to actually counter it, which is kind of a bit lame, really. Then there are the tilt controls. Some bosses have segments where you have to tilt the 3DS around to either avoid or hit your opponents. However, what the 3DS defines as resting normally involves placing your character directly on the hinge so you can't actually see your character. It also has a bit of a problem in just recalibrating itself mid-section. So you could be tilting this 3DS around, and if you hold it for just like a fragment of a second too long in a certain direction, then that will be like, yes, this is now your resting state. So you end up slowly tilting it more and more and more to try and actually move your character around, because it just keeps recalibrating itself. This ended up in one boss battle and me just getting stuck in one corner, despite me like flipping it around, because it just thought I was constantly tilting it in one direction like the entire time, and I just died over and over. Another problem would be if you've got 3D based on being in a very specific orientation to the screen, and a very specific distance and like location to the screen, tilting your 3DS around is less than helpful, because then your 3DS starts flipping out. I'd occasionally flip the 3D all the way up to kind of actually see if it made any difference. And the only times I can say it ever worked and kind of looked good is during the any like fight scenes, as the fight scenes are all 2.5D, so you kind of the altering levels of depth actually kind of work and quite interesting. Then in the overworld, it's kind of useless because you end up basically looking at it as if you're looking at the screen with another screen in front of it with the UI like just as a sticker on top, and it just seems a little silly. Here's a quick bit of advice. During the game, you get special stat-boosting beans which you can apply to your characters. I put every single one that I found, which was most of them, into Luigi, and even then his attack and his speed were pretty much identical to Mario's, and Luigi was using power and speed increasing gear. You might as well just put everything into Mario because the game obviously wants him to move first. And also, seeing as, you know, in the dream world, Mario is the only one that actually takes any damage. As Luigi's more of a guardian spirit during that time, you might as well just buff Mario up because otherwise he's just going to die all the time. I felt like they could have done a lot more with the dream sections. You know, it's meant to be inside Luigi's head, so where are the giant statues of Luigi being like a super hunk? Or maybe like Luigi as a superhero? Or like any form of god complex being present? Instead, it's just a subpar platforming section through the entire game. The only interesting part really ever was when you go into the deep dream segment, where it's like deep into Luigi's mind, where you got lots of floating text floating past saying like, I wish I could be as cool as Big Bro, which is like really interesting, but never mentioned or looked at ever. The soundtrack during this time was also a bit of a letdown, as, you know, it's meant to be an entirely different dimension, and yet the soundtrack is pretty much along the same lines as the overworld and the normal world. I was hoping for something along the lines of like the a cappella sections in Mario Sunshine. This game is fucking long, with my game taking about 80 hours. And that wasn't with me doing any of, like, spending that much time on any of the mini games or backtracking all that much to get all the extra loot. It really begins to drag on towards the end, which is mostly due to the crap ton of conversations and fuck you, Starlo, why are you even there? It's not a bad game by any means, it's actually pretty decent. There's just such levels of hand-holding and so many goddamn conversations that, you know, it can be a bit tiring at times. It can actually be pretty funny at times. The problem is there's just like days of tedious conversation in between. Hello, and thank you for watching my video. If you liked this video, feel free to share it with everyone you know, everyone you don't know, the cat down the street, the lady down the street, the lady up the street, west side, east side, north side, upside down, inside. Or if you hate me, let me know in the comments, as vividly and poorly spelt and with as many grammatical errors as physically possible, so that way I can really understand what you're trying to tell me. If you'd like to see more of my videos, feel free to click on one of the 2 videos on the screen, or even if you're crazy, subscribe! One of these videos is another game review, and another one's an anime review on my other channel. Toodaloo! The previous games have all had some form of game. Yeah. These links... Sweet nectar. Another problem was the future... It's not a terrible game by any means. It's just, you know... hammers. It's not a terrible game by any means. It's just... it's actually... blah 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 blah.